Milan management was yapping today. Look at this quote here from Giorgio Furlani, Milan CEO, talking about the firing of Maldini. He said that it had to happen if we want to move forward to recognize Jerry's vision, Jerry being the owner of Milan, Jerry Cardinale. And he said, with Redbird Capital, we are more focused on commercial growth. And what a horrible quote, basically saying that we're going to recognize Jerry's vision, an American sports owner with no background in football, over a legend of this football club who pulled us out of the embarrassment of the banter era. Now, I'm not a full Redbird hater. They've done some good things, I think, and that quote does suck. It's hard to swallow, but at least I can appreciate the honesty. And Jerry Cardinale today, Milan's owner, also spoke to Harvard Business School and talked about a bunch of things, talked about selling Tonali, talked about building a new stadium, but amongst all of it, talked mostly about how the club wants to spend money moving forward and grow. So some of the highlights here, he did say that when he wanted to buy the club, people told him no because you can't make money in Italy. And he said that when people usually invest in sports clubs, they do so because they are emotionally invested. And emotion like this can lead to putting trophies above everything else. And this kind of mentality can lead to overspending and is the worst thing to do as an investor. Which, again, tough to hear as a fan because you want to win trophies, but I do get it because you ultimately want a club that is sustainable and runs well. And that's why he brought in Furlani to bring a more disciplined approach to transfer markets and overall spending. He then talked about Berlusconi actually and said that back in the day, Berlusconi basically bought the league by buying the best players and that now we can't do that because clubs are much more rich than us. And then said this too, which kind of killed me, saying we have to spend every dollar of capital more intelligently than our rivals, which are we doing that now? I'm not so sure. He then capped off by saying he's not trying to Americanize Milan, but he's trying to bring some American elements to the club to help them grow, and this includes trying to get them more broadcast rights across the world. And finally, Jerry said that winning championships is obviously an important goal, but you have to balance that with winning smartly. He then said that he knows the fans want to win something every single year, but for the investors, what maximizes cash flow and brand and value, so corporate, is just making sure that Milan stay competitive every year in the Serie A, in the Champions League. He then said, look at Inter. They won the championship last year and then they went bankrupt. Is that what we want? And the response from Beppe was so funny to me. He was pretty much like, hey, come on, Jerry. That's not very nice. So a lot of information there, a lot to digest. And what I will say is I don't disagree with him for the most part. Some things I do, but I can appreciate the honesty and, being real about where the club is at right now. It's just so corporate, it's so business, and also a bit negative in some cases too, because he talks a bunch about like the regulations, things that we can't do now, money we can't spend. It's not the most uplifting things to hear from your owner. In a perfect world, you want your owner to love your club as much as you do, right? You want them to run the club well, but you also want them sometimes to maybe spend a bit more money in order to maybe win some things quicker, which is clear now that's not going to happen at Milan. It's very clear that Jerry is not connected to Milan in that way. And for him, Milan is just a project to build into a very, very profitable business. He's not losing sleep when Milan lose 7 derbies in a row, whatever it was. And I guess in some ways, that's football now, right? Like football has become such a business that look at the top clubs in the world. How many of those owners have a genuine love for the clubs that they own? Probably not many. There's always a bit of a disconnect there, but I do feel like with Jerry, it's a bit more because he doesn't speak very much. He's not at the games very often. Didn't go to our anniversary game or anniversary dinner, and that's a horrible look in my opinion. We look back at Berlusconi as the GOAT of Milan owners, and he was for sure, right? He did put us in the banter era, and that was a horrible era in Milan history, but at the same time, this club became what it was because he spent the money on those players, built those teams, won those titles, right? And I'm no Harvard business graduate, but I'm pretty sure the saying goes, you have to spend money to make money, and Berlusconi spent the money. Jerry and Furlani talk a lot about spending money smartly and winning smartly, and I do appreciate that, but are we doing that in every way possible right now? I'm not so sure. Was Fonseca the right guy to spend money on? I don't know. Was Emerson Royale and Ruben Loftus-Cheek the right way to spend $35 million? Again, I'm not so sure. I want to win smartly too, but we're not winning at all right now. His plan relies heavily on competing for the Scudetto, competing in the Champions League, making Champions League football, and all of that right now seems very unlikely. But it does make sense what he's saying about, just having to stay relevant and, in the mix to make money. But football fans are emotional, man. We are not very patient. We live game to game, and we don't look at financial reports. We look at trophies won. I hear what he's saying. It does make sense for the most part. There's clearly a long-term plan here. But do I have faith in him to carry it out? I'm not so sure. And the issue is now, only time will tell.